If you need a little bit of help with your podcast launch, growth, or monetization strategy, head on over to my website, www.podcastingbusiness.school, and get signed up for a free podcast profit potential discovery call. During this free 20-minute discovery call session, I'm going to analyze your podcasting brand and tell you where I think you're missing on an opportunity for profits. Next, I'm going to tell you exactly what I suggest that you do as your next step. If I've got an offer that would help you accelerate the process, we can discuss working together as well. So head on over to my website, www.podcastingbusiness.school, and click on the Discovery Call button to schedule your free Podcast Profit Potential Discovery Call. What's up, Pod Pals? It's your buddy Adam, and you are listening to Podcasting Business School. It's the show where I teach podcasters how to love your podcast like a hobby and build it like a business. If you're an online coach, consultant, or a service provider, and you're looking to learn how to leverage your podcast to build your online business and get more clients, you're in the right spot. I got a podcast audit going on today with my pod pal, Naomi, from the Leaving Well, a navigation guide for workplace transitions podcast. Naomi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam. I'm excited for this audit.
Yes, I'm very excited. I think you've got an interesting show, an interesting concept, and I just want to hit the ground running. Let's dig in. So my world famous podcast audit question. If we're having a conversation 6 months from today, everything has gone really, really well for your show over the next 6 months, hopefully because of something genius that I talked about here today. What would that look like for you? What would success really look like in the podcasting space for you over 6 months?
I think in the next 6 months, I would love to be able to say that I have had a couple of clients land in my rotation because of the podcast. Like, I think that to me is more important than number of downloads. Like, I've thought about some of the other metrics, and it really boils down to, I want it to be something that creates clients in my database, my pipeline.
Yes. So one of my favorite metrics that I tracked kind of early on to keep myself motivated was dollars per download. So I would go, okay, I got $500 in new clients or something, random number, and I did 200 downloads this month or something like that. And I would just kind of divide it out and go, okay, let's see if we can increase that metric next month. And that kept me going because all of my online clients came from my podcast. I didn't know what any other way to get them at that point. So so I love this metric. I love helping podcasters get more clients from their show. That's kind of my wheelhouse. So you're in luck there. What do you feel like is a roadblock to getting there for you right now? Is it I'm not sure how to do this conversion? Are we kind of newer to podcasting? Anything that you see as a definite, like, this is where I kind of always get stuck type of a scenario?
I think where I feel stuck is that on the flip side, I love being able to send to a potential client, if they're just doing early phases of getting to know me, a couple of podcast episodes. What I find is that they don't necessarily listen to them. They just attach some thought leadership or some trust based on the fact that I have a podcast on the topic. And so what I think is a barrier for me is that if people would listen to the episodes, then we're that much farther ahead when they do become clients, because I've already talked about it. And so I think that is a barrier that I have almost put on myself, of not talking about the things that I actually work with clients on. I've tried to be more for all people when I need to be more focused on what my clients come to me for. And I haven't been doing that. The other thing that I know you're going to say is I can do case studies, and I haven't done any. I do have one scheduled because I've been learning and listening, but
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you are in a very normal part of what I call the podcasting success timeline. You've launched, and now you're in that post-launch frustration zone where you're kind of figuring things out a little bit before, the next zone is the business traction zone, where that 6-month goal, that's exactly what's happening. Yeah. People end up like, they sign up for a discovery call. Oh, how'd you find out about me? I found you. I searched something and I found your podcast. Awesome. And now they've heard you do case studies. They've heard testimonials, and they're kind of just ready to go. It's not a discovery call on should we work together. It's which option is the best way to work together. And good news is this is the reality that I currently exist in. And it's a really great place. And I love helping people like yourself get there. And I definitely think that you can. Okay. So let's
The other thing
dive in. Yeah.
The other thing I think I would say is that I'm at a spot too with my business where I have been booked and busy from referrals. So people who I've worked with before or people who know my work are referring. It's been great. And I know that that's not going to last forever. And so the podcast really needs to start doing its work to help fill the pie of diversification of like how business is coming to me.
Yeah. That's super smart, Naomi. So right now it sounds like you're getting referrals. People are kind of coming into your world from outside sources and you're going, hey, check out my show to kind of, build expert
Yep.
positioning and things like that. But now we want the reverse to happen where they discover you because of your show. They hear you doing solo episodes. They see the case studies once those get going. They hear testimonials and they're signing up to take that next step as a discovery call or purchase an offer, all from the origin of the podcast, which
Yeah.
is
Amazing.
I view it like a funnel, and to me it's the greatest funnel that I've ever built is this show. That's why I consider myself a podcast first marketer, and I love that term. So okay, who is your ideal listener / ideal client? Like, who should be binge listening on your show, and who are you going to be able to help the most with your content?
The audience member that I most want to increase is the nonprofit board member. So it could be a board member, it could be a board chair. Board chairs often hold, and boards, honestly, for nonprofits, hold some of the decision-making power in the work that I do. They're also the ones that are in the place that need to make the decision for interim executive leadership in nonprofits. So that's the one that I want to really increase. What I have currently are a lot of executive directors, which is great. But for them to do work with me that really matters, they need to be really super proactive. So it's nonprofit leaders, board members, executive directors, primarily. And I guess if we're just going to be waving a magic wand, it'd also be cool to have listeners that are in philanthropy, in nonprofit foundations that fund nonprofits, because they can do a lot of good in the work that I do as well.
Okay. So I think the words nonprofit and philanthropy, those are some keywords that we need to kind of circle with our red pen and go, okay, these are a big deal, because those are searchable terms, whether we're adding those to the podcast host description, episode titles, title extension type situations. You know how I operate. I always look at the title, name of the show, and all that stuff. Those are two that we could definitely hone in on. So just so I can be super clear, your show and your content then helps that person in that niche exit into a better situation, or like get
Yeah.
a better workplace situation, kind of upgrade or
So I don't
transition.
work with individuals any longer. I only work, my clients are organizational in nature. And so I either support with interim leadership. So if someone, this sounds really dark and dreary, but if someone dies, resigns, or is terminated, that's when I come in and serve as interim. Or we do proactive work with the whole organization around succession planning, organizational health, et cetera, or board development. So I don't work with individuals anymore, but it is all around the exits and the transition between EDs, executive directors, and CEOs of nonprofits.
Okay, but you're not doing that individual person. It's
Not
from a
anymore.
corporate
Yeah.
same. Okay, so
Yep.
something to consider is, like, when I read the name of your show, I'm like, okay, she is helping somebody that is unhappy or motivated to upgrade their situation, but it seems like it's for that individual to me, like
Yeah.
with the,
That's where it started.
yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, would you be open to discussing a potential rebrand? Because I feel like, I mean, if that was your ideal client, let's leave the name out a few words. We're good. But if you really want to focus on the company and the corporate culture situation and the corporate strategy, I think we need to make that slight
That's,
pivot
yeah.
towards that. I mean, how does that sound to you? I know that can be kind of scary.
No, I know it needs to happen. I mean, I literally have a whole list of people who serve individuals because I don't any longer, so that I can refer them on. And so it doesn't make any sense if my podcast is still bringing folks in. I mean, it does because I have a referral system in place, but yeah,
Yeah.
it needs to be more focused for the organization.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing that I would definitely consider is rebranding the show. I don't think you need a new show at all. It's a slight pivot. The listeners now will be the listeners, as you pivot, but really like I said, the nonprofit, the philanthropy, those are really strong keywords that we can, corporate, nonprofit, philanthropy. I do like workplace transitions. I like all that. So maybe kind of looking at my formula, like I love starting the name of a show with a keyword.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we don't have that. The first word is leaving, which is not a searchable. I mean, nobody's just putting leaving, randomly to find a show like this. So we have an opportunity there, and it really is a big deal. That first word. I've had some clients do some experimentation. I
Yeah.
had one client that just switched. I called it my quick and dirty rebrand, where she took the name of her show and the title extension and flip-flopped
Mm.
them. And so that the first word would be a keyword. And she saw a 200% download increase off her best 7 days ever
Yeah.
in the next 7 days.
I'm not
So
surprised.
it is a big deal. So if we do get a word in there, like I think nonprofit, that would be one that I would try to see if it could make sense.
Yep.
Like nonprofit workplace transitions, or something like that. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yep.
I like that, and it's just kind of like playing the game of putting words in different order and like what makes sense to you as the owner of the brand, the creator of the content, but also really leveraging what we know to work with the keywords and the first word keyword and all that. So I like big keyword strategies, conversations for keyword, and keyword, identifying terms, descriptive, so that the ideal person finds it like, oh my God, where has Naomi been my whole life? This is the perfect show for me. That's the feeling that we want there. So are there any other keywords or things that you really feel like maybe you want to toss out my direction? Like, hey, what about this? What about that?
That's honestly been part of the hard thing, is that I get the concept of what are people searching for, but part of the problem is that they don't know that they need it until their CEO leaves, and they're like, then they start searching. And I think that then it's I guess it would be interim leadership would probably be one that folks are looking for. Succession planning is another big one that people are interested in, and then they really don't know what to do about it. But I think you hit the big ones, like nonprofit workplace transitions is what is the whole thing. Yeah.
And you could title extend it and go nonprofit workplace transitions, colon. I mean, some people just put keyword. They don't even have like conversations about. I mean, it could just be listed like those things that you just mentioned could just be listed like 2 or 3 things there. Like this is what we're talking about, just to kind of get some more topics in there to really make it like interim leadership, Y and Z. Like I like 3 things for some reason, or you could say conversations about strategies for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I love that. And it could literally be strategies for interim leadership, succession planning, and organizational culture. Like that would cover it.
Yes. And me just being nitpicky with my keywords, you have to think about like is organizational culture versus like corporate culture. What fits the best? What's the more searchable term? Like you got to have those kind of little conversations of like, is it this or is it that? But that sounds really good to me. I mean, that's checking a lot of my boxes.
Yep, I think so too. And I even think it would, like, workplace culture would be probably office culture, or workplace culture would be.
There you go. That's what I wanted to get you thinking about. Like, and look at each individual word. And so now we got the rough draft. Now let it sit and come back 24 hours later and go, okay, how does this read? How does it feel? And if any of it feels like, if it doesn't feel like that's the exact person that you want listening to the show, then let's make a little bit of a tweak. Let's figure it out. Let's really call to that person so that they search nonprofit workplace or workplace culture. This show pops up. It's the exact right thing for them. They're, the finger hover. We got to win that battle. They're going, ooh, which one do I pick? Because there's 5 shows that seem to make sense, and we want them to click on your art and binge listen. So,
and I think that also just helps so much, because I think about, like, when I first started, I did serve individuals, and the first, like, I don't know, 30 episodes were really great. People had lovely things to say about them, and they were really supportive for the individual. And the individual isn't the one that necessarily has the budget to work with me, which is fine. And so if this was just to be able to support people with really great conversations, the early iteration was fabulous, but it needs to actually bring in paying clients. So the
Yeah.
shift is good.
Yeah. And this is very top of mind. So you may not need to hear this, but I definitely know there's people out there listening that need to hear this. So I like to remind people, my pod pals, that this rebrand conversation, it is not a conversation about we failed as podcasters. This happens to everybody. I've rebranded every single show that I've ever launched because I didn't get it right the first time. And what Naomi's experiencing here is like, I started talking to this person. Now I'm talking to this other person. And we can't just like hang in there with a name, be like, I'm going to see this thing through. That is not an intelligent decision to make here. Like that's ego driven. And this little pivot is a win, not a fail. So,
well, and it's like you
just saying.
said, have my services changed? Yes, they have, because I identified that individual wasn't the right thing for me.
Yeah.
And so this has just been kind of the hanging on drag of like, how do I get the podcast to match it? So this is super helpful.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk about getting clients. Now we're going to be attracting the right person to the show, the right listener, the right potential client. And we're going to build some expert positioning with them. So what type of content are we putting out there? Are we doing solo episodes? Are we doing interviews? What are we doing?
So the first batch were all interviews. And I am your classic, like, interviews are easier than solo episodes person. But I did start sprinkling in solo episodes. And then I was surprised, and it was like, serves me right and proves the point that
I love it.
People's response to solo episodes were like, more of this, please. And so I have been navigating. I think my pressure that I was putting on myself was that I needed to have a longer solo episode. And then I'm like, I don't have time for that. But the 20-minute max ones, the 11 minutes, like those seem to be really, really powerful. And so I've been doing more of them. And then I also, the case studies, I've got one scheduled, and that feels like where I need to head. If I'm going to do an interview, it needs to be with a past client to talk about the services I offer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I want. You just coached yourself on a podcast audit. Congrats. You're taking over.
I've been listening to your episodes, so like I know what you're gonna say. So
yeah,
it's also need to be like the good student. Like, is this the right thing to do?
I know what you're gonna tell me, Adam. No, I love doing these with people that have listened to a lot of my content, because we can kind of go next level strategy. So for you, yes, solo episodes, yes, case studies. When you do a solo episode, I would love to hear some testimonial audio attached to that. I love looking at the content of the solo episode and go, like, which of my offers, do you have more than one offer, or just have the one?
I mean, yes, I have more than one offer, but it's more in like, what does the organization need? So is it an interim?
Okay.
Is it proactive work, or is it transition support? So yeah, I mean, there's 3 basic ones.
Okay. So what I like to do is I go, all right, what's the topic of the episode? What is the call to action that I have that aligns with that? Is there an offer, or is there a freebie that aligns with that episode? That's my call to action. And then I go, what testimonial do I have that is in alignment with somebody that's worked with me on the topic of this episode? And so I love aligning those 3 things. Yeah. So if I'm talking download growth, I'll probably still do my call to action of like a discovery call. That's kind of my classic move there. But I'll do a testimonial of somebody with my Download Growth Club, or somebody that's done consulting work on that topic. And that is, it's proof right there. And yep. I kick it off. So I would do that. Now, I like the case study idea for sure. With your interviews, I think there's an opportunity, since you're looking at like getting a hold of nonprofit organizations and business, talking to a business, selling to a business. I think there's an opportunity for you to invite brands and nonprofits and businesses in for an interview-based episode and build a relationship with them that could lead to them becoming a client of yours. Yeah. So that's called guest to client. technique or whatever. And there's a lot of people out there doing it in kind of a shady way, which I do not promote, but I love it as a relationship building way. So let's say there's some nonprofit brand out there that you're like dying to work with. You're like, oh my gosh, ideal avatar, would love to work with them. I see how I could help them out. Well, is there an interview opportunity where you could have them on your show, invite them to come on your show as a guest? Maybe you have their, whoever makes a decision maker that makes sense for you to talk to, and talk about their corporate culture, talk about, maybe do like a corporate culture success story episode or something like that, and just get your foot in the door as somebody. Now, let's say the situation happens, and what I would do is let them know ahead of time, hey, at the midpoint of our conversation, I've got to read a little ad, a little promo spot. And you're not reading an ad for somebody else. You're reading an ad for what you do.
I love that.
And they go, oh, and that's what you tell them what you do without directly telling them what you do.
Yeah.
I guarantee you a lot of times they start asking questions about that.
Yep.
And they go, oh, well, that thing that you said that you do, I think, how do we talk about that?
Yeah.
Now you can also seed that in the onboarding information gently. It's not like, what do you want to buy from me once we get done with this podcast interview?
Right.
It is like when I interview a guest, I have them fill out some collaboration opportunity stuff. I'm like, hey, I would love to go live on Instagram. Would you be into that? I would love to do some cross promo email swap. Would you be into that? Potentially being a guest on their show. Would you be interested in that? So I'll put some things out there, but I mean, you could say, I don't know, like, do you ever have outside leadership experts come in to do a workshop on XYZ topic? Are you looking for outside consulting on any of these topics? Like, I'm not afraid to put something like that, but always have the easy out exit strategy option of like, I'm cool, let's just do the episode. Like one of those check boxes. So it's not like you must check a thing that I'm going to sell you on. So it's kind of laid back, easy, and whatever version of that seems like a nice, simple fit for you for an onboarding. So it's like, what's your bio, your picture, all the normal stuff, and then have some sort of a checklist thing that you can bring up later and go, hey, I did see that you do have speakers come in and talk on different topics. And you did mention that you'd potentially be interested in having me, let you know what I could come in and help out with. Do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to set up a separate time to chat? So something like that, like it gives you a reason to follow up at the end. Like, hey, you remember you filled out the thing? Oh yeah. And so that is, if you're going to do an interview, just since you're in that kind of B2B space, I've seen a lot of people really do well with this. And, so for me, this doesn't work as well. I'm more of the collaboration interview where I'm like, hey, you have a top ranked podcast, come on my show. As they're filling out, would you like to have me on your top ranked podcast? Like, that's a huge win for me. But in the B2B space, it's about that connection and just getting your foot in the door with one of their decision makers. So any questions on that? How's that sounding?
No, that sounds good. I think the one thing that I have been doing recently with interviews that I'd be curious your thoughts are that I bring people, like if you think of a stair step, I might be in the middle. And so there's people that offer services that might come before me. And then there's people that offer services that come after. And so I've been very strategically thinking about who are those services. For example, an organization who does mergers and acquisitions in the nonprofit space is perfect in my mind to have on the podcast because I don't do that work. It's a potential referral for both of us. And it's a way for me to build a relationship with them. Hopefully then I'm more top of mind when they have people because they don't do what I do. So I'm just curious what you think about those kind of interviews.
Yes. It's a win for both of you. I just think as podcasters, when we have someone else on our show, we have to think, what's the win for us?
Yep.
And that seems kind of selfish and self-serving, but we really have to start thinking that way. Like, I feel like too many podcasters, we get hit up with all these weird pitches and the emails and like, Adam, I've got the #1 dentist in America that wants to come on podcast. I get hit up by dentists like twice a week. I'm like, who's playing this practical joke on me, sending all these dentists my way to be on my show? Like, it's not funny anymore. People quit doing it. Like we get all that. And a lot of people just say yes because they can't say no. People are just afraid to. I'm like, you don't know this person. Tell them no. Don't even answer the email. Just unsubscribe. Get away from me. Yuck. So we have to be very strategic. Like we all know how hard it is to build our online brand and our podcast and get listeners and build our social media and our email. So if I'm going to let somebody into that ecosystem that I've carefully curated, I've got to have a win or a potential win. It's not just like, oh, I see you promised to share this episode with your 50,000 YouTube followers. Sounds good. Like we got to quit being so naive because that's not happening. It's so easy to fake social media followings and then not follow through, and that episode's already done. Well, they got all the good stuff and they're gone.
100%. And the other thing that I witnessed was a person who has a great following and who is a wonderful person, but their following didn't care about what I was talking about. And so you can literally see the difference because they put it up on YouTube of interactions and engagements because they're not interested in it. And so that's the other thing. It's like, well, of course, if they don't care at all, they're not going to listen, regardless of their audience.
Yeah. So I think it's a huge win and a hell yes for you when you can see the benefit that you're going to gain from having somebody on. As long as you're asking that question, you see a positive, you're like, yep, that's good. And sometimes it's just somebody that you kind of fan out on. You're like, oh my God, I've got all their books. I get access to them. And that's super cool for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a win.
Go. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's so helpful to know too, and to think about is like the win doesn't always have to be the same, but it needs to be the question is like, what is it? Yeah.
What is the win by having this person on? Maybe they do have legit 500,000 people on Instagram, and you're like, I'd really love to go live on Instagram after this episode. And they're like, yes. I'm like, okay, that's huge win. I've had that happen to me before. And oh boy, is that fun when you're on that live stream and people are commenting.
Well, and you've said that to other people before about going live on the day that the episode drops, but I don't think I've heard you say that before of like asking them if they'll go right after you record or right before. That's brilliant.
Yeah. At any time. I mean, at any time you can get access to that volume of people, especially if it's huge. I'll be like, let's go live right now. Let's go. Yep. Let's go. Let's do it right now. I don't care. I'll make it work. So
I love it.
Yeah. So I think you're asking the right questions. So to kind of reset what we've talked about today, kind of recap it. I think the two main action steps, one is going to be the naming strategy. Yep. I think you're due for that. I think it's really going to help. That's going to pull the right people into your world. And then the second one is that, listener client conversion. And we go, all right, expert positioning, solo episodes, testimonial audio alignment, aligned with the CTA, doing the case studies, strategic interviews that make sense.
Yep.
And then repeat for the next 8 years like I have. and good things happen. Hopefully a lot faster than they did for me. But no, that's the recipe. And then you just got to stick with it. I've been talking a lot about this on social media, on Threads specifically, where I'm just like, I'm 8 years deep into this. I have not missed putting out content for 8 years. And at one point, for 3 of the 8 years, I had a health show and this show, and I'm doing multiple episodes per week on both every single week because I've said it before, I'll say it again. One of the biggest missteps in podcasting is podcasters have business level goals and hobby level effort, and it doesn't work. And I see that you're somebody that, you're willing to bring your lunch pail and go to work here and like get done what needs to happen. So I think you're setting yourself up for success with this.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, it's either that I have to do that where the hobby up levels to business, or the podcast needs to have its own little leaving well moment. Cause I enjoy doing it. And if it's not like directly tied to some income source, then it's gonna work. So yeah.
Gotta see the ROI. All right, Naomi, I want you to shout out your website, your social, your podcast. If people want to go and get into your world, if they're like, wow, I think I'm her ideal listener avatar, how do I connect with Naomi? Let them know.
I will let you know. So my website is naomihattaway.com. So naomihattaway.com, and all the things are there. So social, I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, and then podcast also has its own page where you can read the transcripts and listen right in the website if you don't have a favorite podcast player.
All right, Pod Pals, go out there and support Naomi and her show and her brand. All right. If you all are like, oh my gosh, I am just like wishing that I was on that podcast audit with Adam. You can be, Pod Pals. I'm booking for the first quarter of 2025. Head on over to the website, www.podcastingbusiness.school. Click on that freebie button. There's only 3 buttons on my entire website. Click on the one that says freebie and sign up for podcast audit. Hop on my calendar and we will jam out just like we did here today. And with that, Pod Pals, I'm going to send you out into the world wishing you health, happiness, and many downloads. I'll see you on the next episode. Hey there, Pod Pals. Do you feel like you could use a little bit of help with your podcast launch, growth, or with converting your podcast listeners into becoming your best clients? I want you to head on over to my website, www.podcastingbusiness.school, and watch the 4-minute video that talks about who I help and exactly how I can help them out. Next, I want you to click on the Discovery Call button to set up a free podcast profit potential discovery call where we can talk about working together to help you reach your podcasting and online business goals. Head on over to my website, www.podcastingbusiness.school, and get signed up for your free podcast profit potential discovery call.